The August sun burned over Dry Creek Station, turning the platform planks into a griddle and the air to wavering glass. Silas Merrick climbed down from his beat-up wagon, boots stirring a small storm of dust that rose and hung around him like a memory he couldn't shake. It had been 3 years since he put his wife beneath a hill of raw earth, 3 years of waking to an empty reach across the bed and calling a name into a silence that had settled like silt in his bones. The supply list in his pocket felt as heavy as the bank's threat tucked just beneath it. 30 head of cattle, a weary ranch, debts growing like tumbleweeds in a wind that never stopped. This was what remained of the life he built with both hands and unguarded hope. He might have pushed forward to the mercantile, bought salt and coffee and fence staples, and kept the day in motion. But on a faded bench outside the telegraph office sat a woman in a travel dress, posture straight as a plumb line despite the defeat stitched into her expression. Her carpetbag leaned against her boot like a sentinel. Her gloved hands clutched a telegram that flapped in the prairie breeze. Evelyn Hartwell had traveled 2,000 miles from Baltimore with her courage fastened tight and her dreams carefully folded in tissue. In the trunk she'd shipped west, lace gloves, a handful of favorite books, and a wedding dress that would never be worn. At 43, she had answered a matrimonial advertisement placed by a Mr. Amos Rigby, believing quietly that love could still spring in the late season of life. Instead, she met a polite refusal from his family, a curt message deeming her too old to bear children. The town's glances bounced off her measured composure. Silas's footfalls sounded on the platform as he approached. Something about her dignified hurt struck a tuning fork in him. Grief and grit in the same person. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am," he said, voice dry from dust and unsaid things. "Beg pardon, but looks like you're waiting for someone who ain't coming." She lifted her gaze, clear, green, steady as a prairie meadow after rain. "You are quite correct, sir," she said, her words shaped by schoolrooms and drawing rooms. "It seems I have misjudged my circumstances spectacularly." Horace Lyle, the station master, shuffled over with well-meaning awkwardness. "Miss Hartwell, the boarding house keeps safe rooms and decent meals." "Thank you," she replied with an inclination of her head. "I expect I'll manage." Silas saw in her something that reminded him of Clara, his late wife, the particular courage women show when life withdraws the gentle option. His next words surprised even him, rising from some deep aquifer he thought had gone dry. "Miss Hartwell," he began, then paused at the weight of what he was willing to say aloud. "I've got a ranch 10 miles west. It needs a woman's touch, and I need a partner. Someone who knows how to hold fast when the wind don't let up. Life rarely gives what we expect. Sometimes, if we're lucky, it brings what we actually need." Her knuckles whitened on the telegram. "Mr. Merrick, are you proposing what I think you are?" He touched the leather thong around his neck, fingers brushing the ring that hung there, Clara's. "I'm saying any man who believes a woman's worth wanes with years hasn't the sense to deserve those years. I'm saying 2 broken pieces, set side by side with care, can make a whole." The platform held its breath. A train wailed down the line, one long, mournful note that felt like a hinge between what had been and what could be. Evelyn stood, resolve straightening her shoulders. "Mr. Merrick," she said, voice steady, "I accept. If you'll have me, I'll be honored to be your wife." Within the hour, they stood before Justice of the Peace Abel Cordry, whose brows jumped toward his thinning hairline at their request. "Marriage license," Silas said. He kept his hand gentle at Evelyn's elbow. "Today, please," Evelyn added, not defiant, determined. Word ran hot through Dry Creek. By the time they reached the clapboard church, a curious crowd had gathered. Wives whispering behind fans, ranch hands leaning against hitch posts, youngsters peering around skirts and boots. The Reverend cleared his throat. "Marriage is sacred, not to be entered lightly." "We're not careless," Silas said. "We're purposeful." The ceremony was brief and plain, but carried a weight that felt more like a foundation than a flourish. When Justice Cordry pronounced them husband and wife, Evelyn felt the balance of her life shift, not as if dreams had shattered, but as if they had been set down on something solid. As they stepped back into sun, she noticed, the wagon seats slick from years of use, harnesses neatly mended, Silas's gaze flicking to Harrow and Sons Bank with wary instinct. "How bad?" she asked gently once they were on the road. Silas's hands tightened on the reins. Bad enough. Lost much to poor ventures after Clara. Thought I could outrun grief by working harder and picking bad partners. Bank's patience don't last when payment stops. The ranch house rose from the distance like an old promise, kept but weathered. White paint peeled in tired strips. A half-framed addition clung to one side like a sentence cut off mid-thought. The barn leaned under years but stood square. The land, honest, scarred and wide, waited with the patience of things older than hope. Inside, dust turned in shafts of light. A sewing basket rested on the side table. An apron hung by the stove. "I haven't changed much," Silas said, voice thick. "Couldn't make myself." Eveline understood. She knew rooms held by the past. "Perhaps we can change things together," she said softly, "when you're ready." That night, Silas spread his bedroll in the barn, the warm breath of horses and the smell of hay a humble solace. Eveline lay in a bed chosen for another woman, and wondered if love might be less possession and more stewardship. Whether a house made for one heart could shelter two without crowding either. The first month passed like a careful dance. Eveline rose early, learning the rhythm of ranch work. Feeding chickens, milking the cow, measuring each new task with the competence of a woman who understood how to learn. Silas watched her, Eastern polish over iron. She found the account books in Clara's desk, entries precise and steady until 3 years back when they staggered and then stopped. "These numbers tell the truth," Eveline said over breakfast, ledgers open. "But they don't tell the whole story. You've been ladling water with a thimble. We're not sunk yet. The ranch has potential if we're prudent. And I have a plan." Her idea was simple and audacious. Convert the unused north wing into a schoolroom. The nearest school sat 20 miles away, too far for little legs and lean seasons. Families could pay modest tuition, which would cover bank payments and let Eveline return to her vocation of teaching. Silas listened, arms folded, gaze steady. "It'll bring people by. Let 'em see we're not dying. Might be good for the ranch, good for you, good for me." Not everyone approved. At the Mercantile, Eliza Hargreaves spoke too loudly for it to be an accident. Some Eastern women don't grasp small-town propriety. Amos Rigby avoided Eveline's eyes on Main Street, his shame brittle and stiff. The barbs landed, but Eveline carried herself with quiet dignity, the kind cultivated by years of being underestimated and continuing anyway. One evening, broom in hand, Eveline swept the rough boards of the future schoolroom. Silas stood in the doorway, hat turning in his hands. "Folks in town are talking." "Let them," she said. He saw her fingers tremble and watched her still them. "I won't apologize for using what I know. This isn't only about money, it's about making something that proves second chances can do more than survive. They can thrive." He stepped in. "Then we'll make it work." The storm struck a September evening like a judgment. Lightning stitched the sky in jagged seams. Rain hammered the roof. Wind howled around the house as if it meant to tear something loose. Silas burst through the kitchen door, soaked. North fence is down. Lightning took 50 yards. Cattle are scattering. Eveline was already stepping into riding trousers, pulling on his spare slicker. Since their wedding, he had taught her to ride. Nothing like this, though. "You're not going out in that," he said. "How many head?" she asked, binding her hair at her nape. 30, give or take, but we're partners," she said, and moved. The world beyond the door was water and violence. Lightning flashed and revealed the herd, a river of fear pouring through the fence break. They worked the edges, patient pressure turning chaos to a grudging order. Ride wide, circle, lean, speak low to the animals, let calm be stronger than panic. When a young steer bolted toward a gully where floodwater frothed, Eveline pressed her knees, lifted the reins, and went. For one long breath, she heard only thunder and hooves and her own heart. Then the steer turned back, shaking. Hours later, they coaxed the last stragglers into a makeshift pen. The temporary fence would hold until morning. In the barn, rain thundering on the roof, Silas watched Eveline wring water from her hair. "I've never seen anything like it," he said, wonder softening his voice. "How you held steady out there." She stilled, unsure. "For the first time since we married," he said, "I didn't feel like I was shielding you. I felt like we were guarding the same fire." The words hung warm in the damp air. She stepped closer, close enough to see raindrops clinging to his beard. "Is that what we're doing?" she asked. "Guarding the same fire." Maybe it's more than that now. A letter arrived on a crisp October morning, the envelope's elegant script unmistakable. Her sister, Caroline. Eveline read at the kitchen table, fingers steady. Dearest Eve, your sudden marriage stunned us, mother to tears, father to angry pacing. Yet I confess a small pride I cannot deny. You leapt. I have only ever eased into things. Silas entered, tipped his head. Bad news? Mixed, she said, sliding the letter back into its envelope. They think I've lost my mind. Caroline wonders if I found it. That night by firelight, Silas spoke of Clara with the ease of a man who had carried silence too long. The small house they had built together, dreams of children that never came, the illness that arrived early and took all the air from the room. She made me promise, he said, eyes on the low orange glow, not to turn the house into a tomb. Said homes are meant for living. She was right, Eveline said. The schoolroom's nearly ready. 3 families have committed. I think she would have liked it. She'd have loved it, he said. She always said learning is the only wealth that can't be stolen. They finished the schoolroom in long days and lamplit nights. Silas planed desks smooth and sturdy. Eveline sewed curtains from cheap muslin that fell soft as mercy. Fresh paint made the walls glow. In the evenings she read aloud, scripture, poems, primers, her voice turning the dust into dancers. December laid white over the prairie, beautiful and unforgiving. The school opened anyway. 8 children arrived the first day, cheeks red with cold, eyes bright with the hope only new letters can bring. In the evenings, grown men learned columns, and women learned to write the words they'd always spoken with confidence. But winter also brought wolves. Silas found prints by the chicken coop one brittle morning. That night, the pack sang from the ridge, haunting, wild, perilous beauty. They're bold, he said, checking his rifle again. Hunger makes all creatures brave, Eveline replied. They took turns keeping watch. In those quiet hours they told the truths people tell when the dark makes intimacy less dangerous. Eveline spoke of long years in Baltimore. Polite rooms, careful conversations, loneliness thick as velvet on a hot day. Silas spoke of the ranch's first seasons, droughts that cracked soil and resolve, plentiful years that taught patience, then the slow slide after Clara. I gave up, he said softly. Stop trying. I tried too hard, she answered, her hand finding his. Tried to shape life into something it wasn't ready to be. The best things, I think, grow a little wild. The wolves came on the coldest night of the year. Air so sharp it threatened to splinter. Chickens shrieked. Silas grabbed his rifle. He opened the door to find Eveline beside him, fully dressed, shotgun steady. You'll need another pair of eyes, she said. They moved with a practiced rhythm they hadn't known they knew. Lantern light, sharp sounds, steady aim. The wolves were starving, their eyes flashed like coals. Together they drove the pack back toward the trees until the night swallowed their shadows. By dawn they had lost 1 chicken. The rest were alive. Silas watched Eveline lower the gun. We make a good team, he said. We do, she said, cheeks bright. That night, they shared a bed for the first time since their wedding. Not a tempest, but a quiet thaw. Not a rescue, but a recognition. Spring came like the fulfillment of a promise, water singing and wildflowers appearing where no one had planted a thing. The school became the heart of the valley. Children sounded out first words and looked up at Eveline like she'd handed them a key. Laborers added numbers that made sense on paper. Women who had never had time took some anyway, and left smiling. On their first anniversary, Silas led Eveline to the north pasture at dusk. We married as strangers, he said, taking her hands, because we were cornered. I don't feel cornered now. I feel chosen. I'd like to choose you again, with a clear head and a full heart. They renewed their vows under open sky. Neighbors gathered not in gossip, but in affection. Reverend Talbot spoke of love that grows like roots, quiet, persistent, strong. Silas slid a new ring onto her finger, one they'd chosen together, bought with school fees. With this ring, he said, I don't replace what I lost. I begin what we found. Their kiss tasted like spring water. Cattle grazed, unconcerned. Children clapped without restraint. Someone brought a fiddle. For an hour the world leaned toward joy. Eveline noticed the morning glories first, a blue ribbon of blossoms twisting up the perimeter fence where nothing had grown before. She touched Silas's sleeve and pointed. He smiled. Just like us, he said, blooming where no one expected. Years steadied and then rolled. The herd multiplied, not by miracle, but by management. The bank's letters softened and stopped. The school drew children from 30 miles out. Travelers came to know the Merrick place by its tidy yard, warm kitchen, and occasional music ringing from an evening window. They never had children of their own. The body's mysteries remained its own. But their schoolroom, filled with minds they shepherded with care. They never finished the grand addition planned in another season. They finished the rooms they had. The house became a gathering place. Weddings under the cottonwood, church when the preacher's roof leaked, harvest dinners when fields were kind. Each morning, Eveline stood on the porch and watched the morning glories open their blue faces toward the sun. Each evening, Silas took Clara's ring down, touched it to his heart, then tucked it away. Not in sorrow, but gratitude. He had kept his promise. The house wasn't a tomb. It was a table set for many. Not every season was easy. Rain sometimes came late. Fences needed mending. Calves were lost. Disappointments were folded and put away. But through it ran one strong thread. Two people who had said yes in the face of no, then said yes again each day with coffee, careful ledgers, wires stretched straight, lessons taught with patience. One autumn, a former student returned with a letter of admission to a teacher's college and eyes bright with possibility. "You started this," she told Eveline. Eveline cried as if she were the mother, because in all the ways that matter, she was. Another day, a stranger's wagon stopped at the fence. A young man asked for water, drank, and nodded at the morning glories. "You plant those?" "No," Eveline said, handing him a second cup. "But we welcomed them." "Best way to grow anything worth keeping," he said. That evening, as dust settled and the sky went the color of peaches, Silas and Eveline sat with shoulders touching lightly. The first star showed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the train had been late that day?" he asked. "I used to," she said. "Now I wonder what will happen tomorrow." He chuckled. "Tomorrow I mend the south gate and clean the pump. Then I eat the stew you promised. And I teach the children to find north by the stars," she said, "and plan autumn lessons and sit here with you after." "After," he said, content. Later, Eveline paused at the spot where Clara's apron once hung. In its place, a grass wreath made by a child, ribbon faded to a tender shade like a shell's interior. She touched it. It felt true, not replacement but continuation, not erasing, adding. Time did what time does. Gray crept into Silas's beard. Lines deepened around Eveline's eyes. The work changed, softened. Silas taught younger hands how to set a fence straight and take it slow. Eveline told newcomers and neighbors alike the phrase that had become the marrow of her life: "You are not too late." On a late summer anniversary, their neighbors came with casseroles and jokes, affection replacing old suspicion. Reverend Talbot, a bit stooped now, spoke of love that neither leaps nor sleeps, but walks with you into the days you're given. After the lanterns were doused, Eveline and Silas stood by the fence where wild vines first surprised them. "Do you remember the day we married as strangers?" she asked. "I do," he said. "Think we knew what we were doing?" "We knew enough to begin," he said, "and we kept learning." "Perhaps that's all a vow requires," she said. The moon lifted and poured silver over the prairie. A coyote called, a companionable sound now. Silas took her hand. "You asked me once if this house could hold 2 hearts," he said. "Turns out it holds a town." "Because you kept it open," she said. "Because you filled it," he answered. They stood quietly, letting the night say what words didn't need to. A wind carried sage, cut hay, and a whisper of rain. Promise or memory, hard to tell. Morning came. Eveline stepped out at first light, as she always did, and found new blossoms opened, stubborn, lovely, unasked for. She thought of the words that had trailed her across years: too late, too old, too far, too strange. She thought of how wrong they'd been. She turned to ask if Silas wanted coffee now or in 10 minutes. He looked up with that small, sure smile that steadied her. "Do you suppose," she asked, as she had asked herself stepping off that train, "it's ever too late to begin again?" He held out his hand for the cup. When she passed it to him, he squeezed her fingers once. A quiet answer. "Look around. See what we began. If this story found you where you didn't expect it to, share it with someone who might need the reminder. The next chapter can start on any page."